So I think we can get started, Sandra.
Okay, great. So let me know when we're about to go live then, just because I'm not sure if I'm going to see all the participants or not.
You can now just get started. They see you and everything works. Just
okay,
get started.
Perfect. Great. I can see now there's 55 participants. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Sandra Stebbing. I'm a partner at Founders Intelligence. We're really delighted to have you here today. Tell you quickly who we are. We're the entrepreneur-powered strategy consultancy that is now part of Accenture. We help global companies shape and deliver their next big bets around growth. And our DNA is uniquely entrepreneurial, which is why we're super excited to be part of this particular journey. We use the venture world and the kinds of bets that founders and investors, I imagine a number of you are in the audience today, are the kind of bets that you're making as a unique data set to really understand change across industries. So really happy so many of you could join us this morning and go deeper into this really, really interesting new report that's hot off the press. As we're going to be exploring both the topic of new work as well as the relationships between corporates and startups in the German ecosystem. And this has been a collaboration between Founders Intelligence, Accenture, and the German Startup Association. It has a wonderful German name that I'm not going to attempt to pronounce. So this is the first opportunity to hear from some of the people behind this work. It's involved hundreds of conversations with startups, dozens of corporate innovators. And so this is a great chance to ask questions. So really do ask you to please drop in questions in the chat at any time. We're going to have a couple of different moments where we'll be discussing different parts of the report. We're going to be doing about 20 minutes on the report, 20 minutes on a small panel, sort of to give you the practitioner lens, both from the corporate and the startup angle, and then we'll obviously close with any final conclusions. I'm going to start off by talking to the two main collaborators that have made this happen, and just kick off with a question to Sigrid. Sigrid, it's great to have you here. You lead the innovation consulting business for Accenture in the German-speaking market. You've got a team of 100 plus highly entrepreneurial people who want to create transformational change for Accenture's clients, and they obviously want to work in different ways to achieve this. So curious to know, why was this topic of new work and startup and corporate relationships so relevant for you, that, and also obviously in sponsoring the report?
Thank you so much, Sandra, and I'm really pleased to be here. I think it's a great and relevant study, actually, because many of our clients are highly interested in this topic, how to collaborate, what they can learn, the best of, I would say, startups. And actually for Accenture, the large corporates are our clients. Secondly, we are eating our own medicine, I would say. We have founders in our team. Actually, we acquired Founders Intelligence 2 years ago. And this is actually to make Accenture stronger, and also to make us attractive to new talent. And we also have a huge part in the study around talent and to get the best ones, actually, and we want them, and we need to create an environment where they like to work in. And certainly it's really reusing startup data sets also for our client work, because we are looking into data sets which are available for startups where they pop up, where investments are getting taken, to shape future scenarios and strategies for our client work, and create, so to say, beliefs what they should do. So firstly, for our clients, because they have this question. Secondly, for Accenture, to make us better and a better place. And thirdly, really to create future strategies.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sigrid. So, we've been talking about startups as an inspiration, and also as a sort of source of talent and partnership for opportunities. So I wanted to, Francesca, you're the other important sort of voice and factor behind this. You lead the biggest German startup association, and obviously your organization is crucial to bringing the German ecosystem together. We know you have a very influential voice, and you really help influence the political agenda and publish a lot of research that's very influential, including the German Startup Monitor. I think it goes without saying, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about why you think this topic is so important, in particular the way it's framed. We see a lot of reports around startups or analysis of different industries. This is really a much broader sweep around talent, culture, ways of working. What does it mean to have a career in this space? So yeah, I would love to hear a little bit about your insights there.
Yeah, thank you, Sandra. As you know, the German Startup Association is always pushing for the best conditions for founders in Germany as well as in the European Union, because we are convinced startups are the innovators of the economy itself, and their disruptive solutions are the key to a better future for all of us. So we're always looking into the challenges they are facing in Germany along their business development. And we now have 1,200 members. So we hear these stories every day, what they are facing in their day-to-day business. And of course, there are stories about capital and investments and missing capital. But there are also always stories about talent, how to acquire talent, how to engage talent, how to develop talent, how to keep talent. Because we all know without the people working in the startups, the best ideas will not come to life. So talent is very key to successful startups. And we've seen a lot of discussions on talent shortage in Germany over the last couple of months, even years. And startups are no exception here, because we're missing talent all over the place in every sector, every field of expertise. There are jobs to fill and not many hands to fill these jobs. And startups in particular are competing with corporates in Germany as well as other international startups when it comes to this talent. So they need to make an extra effort. And that's why it's so important for us to look in the topic of new work, because one thing is an attractive employee stock option plan they can offer their employees. That's a tool to participate in a possible exit. And we are working on better conditions here right now, as Germany is far behind on ESOP regulations in international comparison. But on the other hand, the great asset startups bring to the table is the working environment. How you work in a startup is highly attractive to especially young employees. And we wanted to look deeper into the buzzword new work. We wanted to find out what really draws talent to startups, and also see how corporates, on the other hand, who are also facing talent shortage, can learn from startups on the matter, and what corporates are doing when it comes to new work. So that's why I'm very, very happy that Accenture partnered with us on this very special project. So thank you, Sebastian and team, for this great cooperation, and can't wait for the results and for the discussion after that. And I'm very pleased that so many take the interest as well. So let's head on to the results.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm sure everyone is looking forward to hearing them. I want to just sort of as a reminder, encourage all of you to drop in questions. And again, we'll have a panel discussion a little bit later as well, and would love some inputs from the group. So now I think we built up some of the expectation around the session, and would love to pass it over to Alexander Hirschfeld and Sebastian Günther, who've both been leading the research with the respective teams, and really looking forward to hearing some of the details. So I'll pass it over to the two of you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And thank you for the introduction as well. I hope you all see the presentation. Sandra, give me a thumbs up if it works. Yes, perfect. Yes. As has already been mentioned, we really think about the current situation as being one of fundamental transition, digitalization, technological advancements, especially at the moment in the context of AI, but also societal shifts, talking about demographic changes and stuff like that. And we should also not forget that the pandemic isn't that far away, and the way we worked and we thought about our life and our work has changed fundamentally during this period. So we thought Startups Association and Accenture now is the perfect time basically to really dive into this area of new work and get a better idea of how pioneers, and we really think about startups as pioneers, kind of work and also want to work in the future. And at the same time, we were also interested in how can they sustain the way of working when they scale, when they grow, and also what impact startups and their way of working has on bigger companies. And that's why we decided not only to look at startups, but also to look at corporates and more specifically look at their innovation units, because these units, and Sigrid told it at the beginning, are key for kind of changing the corporate world, but are also important to kind of building a bridge between corporates and startups. And so that was basically the research design and also the reason why we didn't just focus on startups, but also on corporate innovation units, because they are kind of the transition, the bridge between the two worlds. And first of all, what we want to mention briefly is, of course, there are challenges at the moment, challenging times. We know that investments in 2022 went down. Also, newly founded startups went down. But we also think that you have to look at it a little more in a long-term perspective, because when we look at funding data, for example, the money that startups received in 2022, it was still the second best year in history. I mean, 2021 was crazy, was great, but 2022 is still the second best year. So we can really say that in a long-term perspective, the ecosystem continues to grow. And I think this is a very important message. We all don't know what the future may hold, but it is very likely that the innovation ecosystem, startups as well as corporate innovation ecosystem units will remain strong and even get stronger in the next couple of years. I think that's a very important message that we want to, at the beginning of the report, just mention to you. Franziska already touched on that. Who works at startups? I think that's the first very important question that we have to address in order to really get our heads around what we're talking about and also who we are talking about. And the first aspect, it's not that surprising. People working at startups are far younger, but we were really surprised of how young they were. They are more on average 10 years younger than the average working population. And we really have this huge peak at the young generation. When you look at the workforce in Germany, you have a very equal distribution on all age group and startups. And you see it in the report, you really have this peak in the late 20s, 30s, at the very beginning of one's career. And this is very interesting, we think. And the second, I would say even more important aspect is the education level. We really have a very strong talent in the startup ecosystem. 86% have an academic background, and in the general working population, this number is only 24. And what is also interesting, the number is pretty close to the numbers that we have among founders in Germany. So we really talk about a very specific group of people, highly educated talent, and startups really function as kind of a magnet that draws this talent and gives them ways to develop and ways to grow as an employee. So the other important aspect, I think, a very overall question that we asked, how satisfied are you with your job? And to keep it simple, we only looked at the very high satisfaction rates. So people who give satisfaction on the job a 9 or even a 10 out of 10. So probably think about yourself, would you give your satisfaction at the moment a 9 or a 10 out of 10? To keep it simple, we just focused on that. And there we see two important things, I think. On the one hand, startup employees on a high level, 32%, give it a 9 or 10 out of 10 concerning their general job satisfaction. And this is 10 points higher than within the general working population. And what is also interesting, when you look at income satisfaction, the numbers are lower than in the general working population. So you see that even though income is kind of a challenge, and Franziska also addressed that at the beginning, we have a fairly high general job satisfaction, and that really points to the fact that there are many other aspects involved. And what we also did, and just giving you that as an additional information, we looked at people who are very satisfied with their income, and then the number even increases from 33 to 56%. So if we could also get this income aspect a little higher and people more satisfied in this respect, the general satisfaction will also grow. So this is another aspect where the startup ecosystem really has a lot of potential to grow. So what really makes new workers in the startup ecosystem, or what makes employees happy, what makes them satisfied? above all, it's basically flexibility. People want to be flexible. They want to work at any time from anywhere. That's very important. And I think the pandemic has had a huge impact on that, to really make people realize that they want that, and also that they want to stick with it. And I think the other important aspect that's always mentioned concerning startups, and now we have the data for that, is the aspect of purpose. People want to learn new things, and also they want to see the impact of their work. They want to really realize what I do changes something, and they want to see what kind of responsibilities they have, and also that they get stuff done, basically. And at the same time, if you look at more, I'd say, traditional aspects, for example, job security, we see that this is not that important in the startup sector. The number here is 40%. In the general working population, it's about 80+. So you see that this group is a highly educated group that knows that if they change work, if they change jobs, they have a good chance of getting something adequate and are really well positioned in the employee market. The next important aspect, kind of an underlying aspect, is the sense of community. And it's really hard to measure community, but we try to do it and have a number of different aspects asked in the survey, and all kind of score in the, or point us in the same direction. We see that people in startups basically know each other by name. They know everyone, basically. They have also the opportunity to talk to their CEO directly, which is, I think, a big difference compared to corporates. You know that I can call him, I can call her, I can really reach out, and that makes the community, that shows the community is pretty close, that you have a high level of trust, and that there's also a high level of transparency within the organization. And that's also visible when you look at the structures. There's a lot of work between teams, which is kind of normal if you have a small team. And also most of the people say that they have no or very low hierarchies, which I think you know about startups, but I'll say now we have the numbers and can really show how it looks like in more detail. So now we have talked about startups a little bit. Sebastian will just in a second talk about the corporates in more detail, but I'll just give you 2 slides on the corporate aspect. The first thing I touched upon at the very beginning, you really see that this innovation ecosystem units that we have on the corporate sides, they are becoming more and more important. And one thing we got from the interviews, which we found very interesting, is that people said they're closing more and more, they're getting more and more close to the board, to the leadership within the corporate, within the company. So people realize in the different corporates, this is a very important field for innovation, for change, for growth. It's not something that we just do work with startups because everyone does it, but it's really key for strategy, for strategic development. And that's what we got, the sense that we got from the interviews, basically. And the other important aspect, and I think Sigrid talked about it quite a bit, this innovation ecosystem units, not only as an aspect that drives innovation, getting new products, getting a feel of the market, basically, but also a place for career opportunities. On the one hand, you are more attractive for people from the outside. They look at the corporate differently, see, oh, there's a lot of stuff going on, there are changes, things like that. But at the same time, it's also a great career opportunity for internal talent. People within the corporate who realize, I like the company, but I want to do something else. I want to build something, and I want to see my impact, talking about new work. And that was also very strongly in the interviews. They said at the beginning, when we built this innovation unit, we just hired from the outside. But at some point, we realized that we had so much talent within that can kind of really bring the innovation unit further, because they know the corporate structure, they know what is going on within the corporate, and they can be like the perfect bridge between the 2 worlds. And that was pretty interesting as well. And with that said, to keep it short, I'll hand it over to Sebastian to get in a little bit more detail about also the challenges and the mutual learning opportunities that we have between the 2 worlds, basically.
Thanks, Alex. And let me exactly continue where you left off. I think You already talked about a lot of the professionalization, specifically in the between the corporate and the startup world when we talk about collaboration. But one thing nonetheless we found also during our studies when talking to founders as well as talking to corporates is there is still a certain level of culture clash. So obviously both sides, and we will come to that a bit later, got to know their ways around that, and they found ways around that. But still we got some feedback from the interviews which said like at least 50% of the stuff which is not going to work is not necessarily depending on the product or the technology, but it's actually on the culture on one of the either sides. So there is still a lot of potential and room for improvement on how to basically get this collaboration right, and right meaning in the sense of either working through strategic partnerships, working through investments, or what other kinds of collaboration opportunities between those two worlds. The second part, which we found really interesting, if we go one slide back, one moment, the second part, which we found really interesting here, was also that there are some distinct ways and success factors mentioned from both sides in terms of what is important to them. So one was definitely around open and honest communication between both sides quite early on. The topic of shared goals, and definitely also the topic of cross-functional teams between both sides. And I will come to that in a second. But one other hypothesis, and that's on the next slide, we wanted to look at, and coming also to the points which Alex has mentioned beforehand, was does every startup at a certain point become a corporate, and what impact does it have? You've seen a lot of great numbers in terms of working culture, in terms of flexibility, but we can also clearly see and prove the hypothesis that things are really changing when startups get to the size of 40, 50, 60 employees and beyond. The strong sense of community weakens, there's a clear need for new forms of community and culture in order to grow further and keep that kind of talent. You see this also in the numbers, definitely way lower numbers, 20 percentage points when we talk about the hierarchical company structure. Definitely something around knowing the first names of all of the employees, which is quite interesting. So really 50 employees seems to be a breaking point where obviously for a startup more structures are needed, but on the other side, there's also a need for cultures and communities to grow with that. So what do we found, and what are potential ways to mitigate it? We looked into the corporate world first, and we saw like, okay, how are they actually doing this? Because obviously a corporate is always way beyond those 50 employees. And one of the things definitely in the context of new work we see is our micro communities. Micro communities can develop based on different kind of factors. It can be geographies, can be interests, can be projects, can be unifying elements. But within a corporate, they are really the key to find a sense of belonging and find a home within a corporation. And that's also some of the important learnings, I think, which startups can take from corporates in that sense, that in order to manage talent and obviously gain size, there's also an aspect of managing the communities and the people in a different way in order to keep the talent and also the culture stable. What we also saw, and that's probably the challenge of micro communities for all of the corporates and startups, is that micro communities are heavily dependent on the leadership. And if there's a good leadership, there's obviously a big impact, positive impact on the micro communities. If there's bad leadership and management, this obviously has a similar bad impact. And you can also see this in terms of the numbers. And when we specifically look into the startup world, the numbers are not as high. So around 50% would, even when we look at the smaller startups, would put words towards their leadership attributes like cooperative, transparent, decisive. And they get even lower when we obviously look at startups beyond 50 employees. So there is definitely a big aspect, which is not necessarily surprising, that obviously a lot of the focus is relying on the technology, on the product itself. but there's definitely an important leadership aspect specifically towards growth, and not necessarily only in the startup. It's also a lesson, I think, concerning corporations, building up new businesses, building up new units within the corporation, that if you grow to a certain size, the leadership aspect, and specifically for the younger talent, this leadership aspect becomes way more important and is a big focus point for further development. When we looked a bit deeper into what do people consider beyond leadership with new work, and specifically looking into the startup world, we also saw that obviously there's a big impact in terms of flexibility. So that's driving definitely the job satisfaction you have seen before. So there's a flexibility with a place of work, there's a flexibility in terms of working hours, but there's still a similar potential and also need for employees to focus on with standardized offerings on other topics. You can see it here on the slide around physical health, around mental health. And there was also a separate topic which we looked at when we talked about trainings, and not only on-the-job trainings, which is predominantly happening in startups right now, but also in terms of expectations towards formalized training offers. So new work definitely is a broader topic than just the flexibility around place and time of work. And definitely on both sides, people and talent are looking in that situation for broader offerings also in the other spaces, being it physical and mental health and other areas. When we talk about professionalization, one aspect we also looked at was what are the solutions and success factors? How do successful corporations as well as startups who are working quite successfully with corporations, what are their success criteria in order to make this happen? And what we found on the corporation side is very often they have very dedicated roles to bridge this culture gap. On the one side, they work obviously in those corporate innovation units, but they also have a rigorous facilitation process on how to work with the startup, how to make it really worthwhile and beneficial for both parties. And similarly on the startup side, specifically if startups are growing in the direction of scale-ups, they often bring in people who understand the corporate world better, who can then exactly facilitate from the other side both ways and really make this collaboration successful and fruitful. And that obviously there's always a need specifically for this moderator role and translation role in startups as well as in corporates. The last topic we looked at was also around ecosystem networks and platforms. So obviously there are a lot of platforms already established, and both corporates and startups are very positive in the feedback that this has helped over the past years to professionalize this kind of relationship. But one thing we also see specifically which was quite positive, I think, in terms of outlook over the past 12 to 18 months, is that both sides still have a very strong positive outlook towards that collaboration. So there is a big difference we see compared to previous years, that very often in times where it gets more difficult, obviously on the corporate side, the innovation activities are ramping down or are at least a bit prolonged. So there's definitely positive notion from all of the interviews we had with corporates, as well as from the startup side, to continue the strategical path of working together, finding collaboration opportunities in the many shapes and forms there are. But it was also, I think, quite a surprising and positive view we can basically show with the numbers of the study. So this was obviously just a quick run through of the highlights of the study. There's way more data and there's way more you can look at, and we will share, I think, the study after this event with you. So happy to take your questions and your feedback either now or also beyond, and looking forward to the discussion. Sandra.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions from the audience, and please do keep them coming. So one from Timon is, in the interview process, did you only ask founders or employees or both? I'm assuming from the volume it's probably a mix, but yeah, somebody in the audience was curious about that.
Should I take that, Sebastian? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. So we basically had a mixed design. On the one hand, we did a quantitative survey, and the survey we passed to founders and employees of startups. So we covered basically the startup side with a questionnaire, with a quantitative questionnaire, and the corporate side we did cover with in-depth interviews. So we did 15 interviews with corporates. So kind of, I mean, the best way would have been to have a survey in both areas and also interviews in both areas, but we decided to kind of get a very efficient way to get a good and clear picture, and that was the way we did it. Yeah.
Excellent. So I'm just going through the questions live here. There's a broad question, I guess, to both of you, which is now having been in the weeds on this thing for a while now. Which insights were most surprising? Was there anything that came up that you weren't expecting?
For me, it was really the last point. So I think we shared already the positive outlook on the startup side a couple of months ago directly when we had the results of the survey. I think the positive notion and the strategic notion of this collaboration also on the corporate side, and the importance of that also during maybe now a bit more difficult economical times. I think that was the thing which I found really positive, because obviously I'm also a big advocate of that collaboration, and I believe that a lot of the innovation is building in the ecosystem. So I find this really positive news for the corporate side as well as for the startup side, that this has to continue and will continue in the future.
Absolutely. Anything from you, Alexander?
Yeah, for me, it was the leadership aspect that Sebastian talked about just now. I mean, startups have employees say a very transparent, decisive, and kind of approachable leadership on eye level, and that kind of becomes problematic when they scale, when they get bigger. So I think it really comes to leadership to kind of get new work and this motivation aspect going when the company grows in size, and there's a lot to do here, and this is very important and interesting also for us as an association. Yeah.
Excellent. So there was one question that I know Azadeh might take in her section when we get to the panel, but wanted to see if you guys had any high level thoughts on this one as well, which is, you know, one of the things that you mentioned is that innovation units within corporates are actually becoming more influential, getting closer to boards. And then the question was whether you see there's some aspect of contagion, whether the fact that innovation is now closer to senior leadership and to boards. Are you seeing different kind of ways of working? Is it becoming contagious to the boards in essence? So I don't know if in the qualitative discussions, if you heard anything around that as well that you'd like to share, and then obviously I'd love to go a little deeper on it with Azadeh a little further down.
So I think Azadeh is one of the very positive examples. Now SAP is doing this, but I think it really depends. The maturity also depends on the companies. We specifically went for companies who are really active in the ecosystem to understand what are kind of their success factors to make it happen. But we definitely also see a big range of maturity in the collaboration side in the market in general. So I think, yes, it's contagious. Very often it nonetheless needs big sponsors in the big corporates who also acknowledge the relevance, and it's not there across the board. I think for a lot of the big corporations, this has happened already, but there's also big potential for a lot of other corporations to get on the train basically and leverage this as an additional source for innovation.
Excellent. And then maybe a last question, so we stay on time. It's a question from Julia Wittenhagen. She's curious to know where startups can gain knowledge about building these kinds of micro communities that you said are particularly essential as sort of businesses scale, et cetera. So are there any sources that you would point her to, or that you think are helpful to build this capacity?
We can definitely. So there is also some additional research around micro communities. So we had this was just one of our findings, but obviously there's additional research. So happy to share it after this event. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, both. I think you really brought it to life in 20 minutes, even though it's, as you said, a very, very substantial piece of research. So a lot more to dive into. For all of you interested, please do look at the report. So we're going to switch over to what we're calling kind of a panel discussion. But primarily what we wanted to do is we've had almost the theory and the answers sort of from the ground. We wanted to go a little bit into the practitioner lens and hear from both the corporate side as well as the startup side. So wanted to introduce Lisa Dahlke, who's a co-founder and CRO of Localize, and Azadeh, I'm sorry, but I'm probably going to mispronounce your name, so I'll let you say it yourself when you introduce yourself, who's the director of SAP IO Foundry in Berlin. I'd love for both of you just give me a quick minute on who you are, what you do in your organizations, and then we can jump into some of the specific questions. And I see some more questions coming in, so please do keep those going.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You want to kick off?
Yeah, thank you so much. Happy to kick off. My name is Lisa. I'm the co-founder of Localize. I founded Localize 2018, and before that, I actually worked in talent acquisition and HR myself. So it was very interesting for me to learn about the insights of the report today. Very exciting. What we do with Localize is we break down borders for companies and their employees. We build a platform that supports HR teams with relocating their international employees and to monitor all the movements in between different offices and also countries. So I think Franziska spoke earlier about the talent shortage, and that's definitely something we're supporting with. So we, for example, support with visa processes, residence permit changes, A1 certificates, but also banking and insurance for international employees. I founded Localize together with my two co-founders in Hamburg, Germany, but we're not only operating in Germany anymore, also in the UK, in the Netherlands, in Spain, also in the US, which is interesting related to time zones, I can tell you. So our team is pretty distributed in these countries too, and we are operating in a remote first setup. We raised our Series A almost 2 years ago, then our Series B of 35 million in September last year, and we were growing from 20 to 100 people within these 2 years. So a lot of great things happened, but this growth is of course also coming together with a few exciting challenges, and we're definitely above the 50 employees now. So yeah, happy to speak about that later as well.
Great, thank you so much. Azadeh?
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm Azadeh. I'm leading the SAP IO Foundry in Berlin. For the audience who doesn't know what SAP IO is the Open Innovation Unit at SAP. We work with startups in a go-to-market partnership models. Like many other corporations, we started as an accelerator in 2017 with the idea, because back then it was really popular to have accelerators, not anymore. So everybody hates to join accelerators. I know that from the startup side and from our community as well. So we kind of transformed from being a typical accelerator to a partnership program, because we also knew that what startup want to get out of a partnership and working with corporations. At SAP IO, we have 11 locations globally, from Shanghai to San Francisco. I'm proud to say that Berlin is our flagship location, and yeah, we work with startups B2B, SaaS, preferably Series A plus. So I think I can stop right here and take the rest of the conversation. But I want to actually add something that Sebastian Alexander, great job, because I was really having a hard time controlling myself not to nod along when you were reading from the report. Awesome job.
Excellent, thank you. Look forward to getting some answers from you. I know we have a couple of areas to discuss, but I wanted to kick off with Lisa first. So obviously we've just spent the last 20 minutes hearing about the importance of culture in startups. So whether it's in and around the higher levels of satisfaction, flexibility, proximity, leadership, purpose, et cetera. You obviously have shaped a business where not only are you helping, deliver culture for others, but obviously it's really crucial to your own business. Can you talk a little bit about how you shape it? How do you think about some of these things in a structured way and how that's been evolving?
Yep, 100%. And I definitely agree that culture is super relevant for every startup company. And this also has been super important for us as a business. I think like for me, it's also interesting to look back now because what I realized that is in the early days, the culture was there like pretty naturally, I would say. So you did not have to work on it a lot. It was clear to everyone how our culture was, what it meant, what our company values were, etc. And that was like super clear to everyone when we were only like 10 to 20 people. The bigger we got, the more we kind of realized that we actively need to work on the culture and also the community aspect, company values, all these kind of topics. And what we now do is, for example, doing value workshops on a quarterly basis to really speak like openly about our company values, also giving value awards to employees every quarter. So people who particularly lift our values. And we also do like coffee chats where people get randomly paired, office hours. We do gaming events in evenings with smaller groups to support personal connections as well. We also have like different channels to specific topics. So the food channel and the animal channel is pretty popular at Localize. So just like, I don't want to use the word force, but sometimes it feels like it, to just like force collaboration, also like the community aspect and the culture that people also get this personal connection, because this is for us like super, super important because we are a distributed team. I think the flexibility topic is also an interesting one. So initially we started the company before COVID. And then COVID hit and we became more and more remote. And then at some point also, hired people across Germany, also like in different countries. So at some point there was like basically no way back. I think like now we do have employees in more than 7 countries with, which also means that they cannot meet their colleagues on a daily or weekly basis in offices. So I think like also there we have to actively work on that. We do company offsites twice per year, but also launched another initiative at the beginning of the year. It's called Loka Boost, and every employee gets 500 euro per quarter. And they can spend this to meet people in different cities, to different or in different countries, or they can just like also equip their remote office a little bit more. So both options are possible. The goal is, and that's where the name is coming from, to boost productivity, engagement, but also like really teamwork and creativity. So I, for example, met with 15 people in Spain in March. Another team is currently in Italy, and the feedback from the team has been super, super positive. So we do see pictures of people meeting up on a weekly basis in our team channels, etc. And this is like, for me also as a founder, this is super great to see. And this has been a super successful initiative. And overall, I think like the flexibility piece is just super important. We do see that for our employees as well. So some of them even say, I cannot imagine to go into, in office culture, like basically going back to this like 5-day in office setup. So I can definitely agree to the findings from the report.
I absolutely love this Loka Boost idea. I think it's brilliant, especially after COVID, where everyone's felt very disjoined. So I'm gonna start lobbying for that in more places. So, I mean, I think what I'm hearing from you is that it's so important to be deliberate. I feel like having been in the space for close to 15 years, I feel like in the beginning, culture was like no one's job in startups, and increasingly people are being very proactive about it. We heard also in the discussion and from the report that there's obviously a transition, a tipping point. If you alluded to your own growth yourself, but this idea that, you know, eventually every startup hits a certain tipping point of scale and you have to become a bit of a corporate in some ways, right? You need more structure, there's more processes, more protocol, you need to manage more people, you no longer know everyone's name, etc. You've gone from 20 to 100 people, Series A to Series B. What kind of, you know, how is this playing out for you? Are you feeling it as a business? And what kind of sort of impacts are you seeing? And how is that kind of changing how you lead, how you attract talent, you know, other activities, you know, beyond maybe Loka Boost that's going to help keep that culture intact as you continue to scale?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think every startup wants to say, no, we're not getting corporate, but I believe that's not 100% true. So I think like every startup needs to grow and also implement structures, be more strict with things, not being like, wishy-washy anymore, be more disciplined when it comes to communication, also availabilities, etc. But I really believe that you can fight becoming a corporate, because sometimes people can get hung up on processes, structures, and like, yeah, but this is like the process. But sometimes it's really about like, okay, like how can we do that quickly without always like, constantly aligning with like the structures and processes we have. I think like, especially if you hire from big organizations, they tend to operate slower. So you also need to do a little bit of like education, also like always the sense of urgency. So that's something we realized, that this is like for us like supernatural, but also like when it comes to projects, for us a project could be, I don't know, we do that within 4 weeks, and at a corporate that could mean, oh, we have like, I don't know, 9 months time for that. So this is an interesting one. But I think you can constantly try to push for speed, and that's important. And that has also been important for us. I think like from a leadership perspective, the communication aspect and also the cross-team collaboration is an interesting one, because I feel it definitely gets harder. And I think for me, that's also like something I underestimated initially. I think like everyone's telling you, yeah, once you get bigger, you need to communicate more, etc., etc. And you're just like, yeah, we'll do that already. But in the end, we also needed to, just like change meeting formats, like how we communicate, etc. And I think like also what we do now is that we really committed to oversharing, over communication, also within the management team, but also across the whole team, so that it's better to say a few things twice or even 3 or 4 times than just like, I don't know, sharing a Notion doc where everything's documented and then just have hope that everyone's reading it, kind of. So I think like that's really something we do right now. And when it comes to cross-team collaboration, we also came up with different initiatives for projects, because we also saw these like typical silos coming up. So we, for example, at our last offsite, we did a hackathon with different people from different departments, etc., to just like make sure that everyone's getting understanding what the other departments are working on. And that's also something we actively working hard on right now, because I think that's like really something we saw in the past, that it's not like super easy to get people from different departments together. And also there, when it was like only 1 or 2 people in each department, it was easy because like almost everyone was involved, but now it's really like something else. So definitely a few things you should always work on, but I think like that's just like normal, I would say, if you go that fast.
No, it's great. We had a question from the audience that I think you've addressed pretty amply around how you lead in this space, and obviously it's brilliant to see that even you're at the helm of a very complex and growing organization, that this is still so central to how you think about leadership. And so obviously super refreshing to see. I think just in the interest of time, because I'm not seeing any additional questions of any of them come in, I will come back to you, Lisa, but I wanted to make the switch over to Azadeh. So thank you so much for bringing everything to life from the startup side. So switching over to Azadeh. Obviously, you guys are extremely well-established players. You highlighted you have a global footprint. You're really well-known in this space. You've matured. You've kind of learned how to do this very well. Just curious to know, from your experience working with startups, have you started to see shifts in the last couple of years? How does what you see in a startup's culture, way of working, et cetera, shape, your desire to select them as partners for the Foundry?
Great question. I want to also compliment Lisa on the local boost idea and share with you, if I want to push that agenda in SAP, probably SAP need to allocate like 50 million euros budget for this. And it will take a year for us, all the spend councils and all the workers' council, to approve this. Just to case my rest on the different scales that we work, but really awesome idea. I think how we work with the startups really in the past years, in the past 6-7 years that we existed, changed. First of all, if you look at our history as SAP.io, we were created 2017. So we are still a startup inside SAP. And that's how we see ourselves in the SAP ecosystem, that we are not only the team that work with startups, but our whole entity is a startup. Because we had this initial idea of how to work with startups, like a product that many startups have in the beginning, and it evolved in the past 7 years to become something completely different, because the market, our customers who were the startups, told us what works best, what doesn't work best. So we transitioned from our whole core and objective in the beginning, and that's how we also got to bring SAP and our different stakeholders internally in line with us. Because back then it was all about, yeah, this is this cool team that does events and does some startup programs, but it has nothing to do with us. Now, when we run the programs, I have a large stakeholder list behind me. I have SAP's product engineering team beside me. I have SAP sales beside me. I have SAP's technology, and basically our whole organization is beside this project. It means that not only the startup team, us, SAP.io, is in a one-to-one, face-to-face interaction with the startups, but all different organizations at SAP and units are working with them. And that makes my job very difficult to bring these two worlds together, but definitely impacts the way that both sides work with each other. So for me, it's important to do a proper expectation management in the beginning and tell the startups, hey, you should know that you are working with a company that has 100,000 plus employees. And also tell my colleagues that, you should be working with a startup that doesn't have much time. Next time this year, they should have been signing like 20 new deals. So we cannot tell them that, yeah, wait for us until the next quarter and we will figure this out next year. So bringing these two worlds together is a very difficult thing, but I have been seeing a great change in the way that these two worlds come together. I mean, simply now that I go to startup calls, the startup CEO comes and say, yes, Azadeh, I know it takes longer, but let me know if it happens in 6 months. So they already know that they need to put a buffer to realize some real collaboration with the startups. And at the same time, our colleagues are getting a little bit more organized in terms of pushing. And this has been the job that I think everybody has a say and has a stake in. Just simply managing calendars. When is the next follow-up? I think, Lisa, in your team, you will be able to set up a follow-up next week, right? Sometimes at SAP, I needed really 2 months to set up the next follow-up. So it's just these small details that makes the culture so different. But at the same time, the transition that I have seen in our organization, and not just only us, our customers, who are also one of the world's largest enterprises, has been really noticeable. I'm going to give you an example of a startup we have been working with past year. Workflex. They actually facilitate vacations from everywhere for employees. And since we are working with them and we are kind of introducing them to our customers, our own colleagues get to know about them. And I'm seeing it more and more now that we are actually passing this culture to our customers, we kind of also get on board. So for us, it's moving the ecosystem at the same time with the exposure that we have with the startups. So to wrap it up, not to go long, for the startups, it's really the culture that went through them is a little bit more organization, sense of commitment, and showing that, yes, it's serious and, we are up for the job. And also for this SAP to understand the sense of urgency of the startups is that brings these two worlds together.
I completely agree. We see a lot of this world as well. There's a lot of finger pointing. The corporates blame the startup blames the corporate for things not moving forward. But it is a bit of a dance between two parties. So it's good to see that you're noting an evolution from both sides. My next question was about culture. I think you've more sort of the culture inside, but it sort of dovetails really well with some of the things you've already touched on, and also the question from the audience around contagion, right? And so as we, curious to see how you actively manage the culture within SAP.io, and also as you get closer to more sort of board or C-suite level functions within the business, are you seeing some of these ways of working, these mindsets, this idea of just sort of overcoming hurdles, moving faster, really making things happen? Is there a bit of contagion? Are you seeing that? You said you wanted to tackle that question, so really curious to see what you've seen.
Yes and no. Yes, because maybe we are just an exception and they are showing their more agile side to us because we're the startup unit. I'm going to give you an example. I mean, in Berlin, whenever we run the program, we actually conclude the program with a demo day. I think everybody knows demo days. In Berlin, in SAP.io, we have been able to get executive board members, actually our C-level for our demo days. And that's where everybody at SAP look at me and said, how do you do this? How do you get time in their calendar to fly to come in for your demo days? And that's basically, I would say, it's the contingency of that culture, because they actually, when our C-suite, when our executive board is in meetings and events that the startups are, they actually come with a full, wholehearted intention and wanting to stay. And really, we find them standing, talking to the startups that they even did not know before for hours, just because they love the culture, they love the agility, they love the dynamic spirit that the startups bring to SAP, and we have been seeing it more and more. So every time we want to plan something, we know that it's an essential yes from the board members to say we will come as long as they can accommodate. So I have been seeing more interest, just simply said, from our CEO, who sends messages, guys, next one, please invite me. I will try to make time to come over. And it's not the marketing side of it, because the events will be usually very exclusive, smaller rounds, so that they can actually talk, but it's a genuine interest that the leadership is showing to learn, have that exchange with the startup. One side of it is, of course, that the startups are ahead of the innovation curve. It's not a secret, but the other one is really from learning from the culture, how they approach the organizations, so on and so forth. So that there is my answer on I see the contingency. And plus, again, I have to say this, not only at SAP, with our customers as well. At least in Germany, the organizations are a little bit hierarchical when it comes to approaching even customers. So some of our account executives cannot directly reach out to our customers' C-levels, because they say that, if you wanted to talk to the C-level of this customer, our global account director should write them. It's not our level. But as at SAP.io, you can write them directly. So because there is this expectation that because it's the startup unit, it's the startup culture, it's okay if they do this. So we are kind of an exception in this relationship, but the whole fact that we are a little bit exempted from this hierarchical behavior shows that the organizations are accepting that working with the startups needs to have a different culture and kind of adapt to it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you. I think you brought that to life really, really eloquently and in a way that I think resonates with my experience with a lot of other companies as well. In the interest of time, we're about 2 minutes out. So thank you to both of you for your really sort of clear, but also really interesting answers around how you're really approaching this within your organizations. And I wanted to thank everyone for your participation, obviously for joining this call today. And we're really looking forward to continuing the conversation. And the report is going to be sent to all of you, and it's going to be available for download on the website of the Startup Association as well. So hopefully this is the first of many conversations that this will trigger, because I think there's lots of different insights, and each of them could be their own 1-hour call. So thank you so much for joining today. It's been a pleasure having all of you. And hopefully more to come from this really, really interesting topic.
Thank you very much.